Throughout the pages of the Bible, God has sent his men for various reasons to nations or even to leaders of nations. In nearly every one of those cases, the message has always been a call to repentance, or else God would send those nations into the hands of their enemies into national captivity. I'm very deeply sorry that I fit into this category, and many times it gives me no pleasure the things that I must say in this congregation and the message that goes out to the rest of the nation. But God has told all the people that he has sent, even since the closing of the Bible, and there are no more written literature until Jesus Christ returns to put it into the pages of the Bible. But he said in Isaiah 58 verse 1, "Cry aloud, spare not, lift up your voice like a trumpet and show my people their transgression." There is a conspiracy in the United States of America today, in this land, in which we have always said is the land of the free, land of the brave. But the United States of America is not the first nation to be plagued by conspirators to bring about their own selfish purposes. The word conspiracy, when you look it up in the Webster's Unabridged Dictionary, means the following: a combination or group of individuals designed toward an evil purpose. It also means an agreement between persons to commit a crime together, such as treason or a plot. It also means a combination or group of men involved in a single person for their or single purpose for their own benefit. There are examples in the Bible where conspiracies have taken place ever since Israel became a nation. In 2 Samuel chapter 15, verses 10 to 12, King David was king of Israel. His son Absalom wanted to become king. So Absalom conspired against David and actually chased him out of Jerusalem at one time, away from the palace. But eventually Absalom met his Waterloo. He died. David was not overthrown. Then in 2 Kings chapter 12, verse 19 and 20, one of the other kings, after Israel had separated the northern 10 tribes and the 2 tribes of the southern known as Judah, a man by the name of Joash's servants conspired against him to overthrow him from the throne. So conspiracy is something that is not new. It's been around a long time. Then when you keep turning in the book of Kings, in 2 Kings chapter 14, verse 17 to 19, you find that Joash's son, Amaziah, once again conspired for the throne. So it seems to be running in the family here. And Israel has an intrigue with conspiracy. They always have. In 2 Kings chapter 15, verse 13 to 15, it discusses a man by the name of Shallum. Shallum committed conspiracy, and he actually overthrew one of the kings of Israel. So once again, conspiracy is a part of the norm when it comes to governments, nations. In 2 Kings chapter 15, verse 30, Hoshea made a conspiracy against Pekah, who was the king of Israel. So once again, conspiracy has always gone on, even during biblical times. In 2 Chronicles chapter 25, verse 27, it says that Amaziah conspired against the living God by turning the people away from God. So once again, conspiracy can either be the overthrow of the political leaders. Conspiracy can be to turn people away from God so that God will bring a curse upon the nation. And then in Jeremiah 11, verse 9, it states that the tribe of Judah, who was actually called the house of Judah, Judah and Benjamin conspired to turn to paganism and against the true and the living God. 27 times the Bible shows that kings, government leaders have led conspiracies or were conspired against. Do we think that this cannot happen in the United States of America today? Do we think that just because the United States was declared a Christian nation February 29th, 1892, that we cannot be de-Christianized to the point where conspiracy could flourish in this country for the destruction of our freedom and bring us into a totalitarian world dictatorship? Could there be conspirators right now in the government of the United States? And they're working their program to merge us into world government so that you and I will lose our freedoms just like behind the Iron and the Bamboo Curtain, just like it was in Nazi Germany during World War II. There was a woman reporter by the name of Karen Lee Bixman. This lady investigated the death of a man by the name of Paul Wiltshire. Now, let me go back and give a little background on this person, and there's a reason why I want to mention this to begin with. It's because there are those individuals called government operatives. They come in secret. They infiltrate organizations that they intend upon destroying. First of all, they try to destroy the leadership of the organization, and then they try to scatter the rest of the individuals that are a part of it. And usually, and I will show in my message today, right from the White House of the United States, right from the Justice Department of the United States government, right from the ex-director of the CIA, that they have a conspiracy to stop the right-wing Christian movement to take America for Christianity. That movement is on in full force right now. What I want to show you to begin with is Karen Lee Bixman, who was a very intelligent reporter in the Washington, D.C. area. She had investigated the death of Paul Wiltshire. Mr. Wiltshire had been in government in the last 30 years before he suddenly disappeared and died. He had assembled documentation and information from 16 CIA operatives who said they wanted out of the system of the United States government. They were willing to come forward with information at their disposal, top government statistics, and information that they'd been gathering. Here's what she said. On the promised guarantee of immunity and safety, they were to reveal their personal knowledge and firsthand experience of the so-called intelligence agencies and the shadow government which control them. Did you notice she said there was a shadow government? Not the real government of the United States, but private individuals that have gained such control that they actually tell the government what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. Innocently, she wrote, Wiltshire believed that newly appointed Attorney General Janet Reno was an honest official who would be willing to expose the long-standing pattern of corruption. On May 21st, 1993, after being denied an appointment with Janet Reno, Wiltshire prepared a 101-page document which was then sent to Reno. Realizing the sensitivity of the information, Wiltshire stated, I quote within the quote, I come from a strong moral background, have a very deep and abiding personal faith, and have been a whistleblower concerning serious attorney, judicial, and governmental corruption on a number of occasions in the past. And I have indeed paid an enormous personal price for speaking out and speaking the truth, because of the positions of authority of those that are blown the whistle on. But the action that I'm now undertaking, blowing the whistle on the most corrupt system that has probably ever existed, I know that my life is laid on the line. Approximately 6 weeks later, according to this report by Karen Lee Bixman, many people in the Washington, D.C. area realized that they had not seen Wiltshire in over a week. His friends requested that the police department in Washington, D.C. go to his apartment, open the door. They wouldn't do it. They denied the request. Finally, on the insistence of a Washington Post reporter by the name of Sarah McClendon, very elderly reporter that's been around and has a contact in every nook and cranny in Washington, D.C., finally the police department went to his apartment on July 23rd, 1993. They found his very rigid corpse sitting on the toilet seat. Over the course of the next several hours, over 20 officers from various government agencies, including the FBI, visited the apartment. Despite the very unusual number of officers present, the FBI agents assured Sarah McClendon when she got to the apartment that they had no interest in the case. However, they seized every record that they could find of Wiltshire's. It included letters, documents, audio cassette tapes, computer disks that contained evidence of wrongdoing given by the 16 CIA operatives right out of their own personal files. Those included information on the BCCI bank scandal, the October surprise, Inslaw, Waco, and drug running out of Mena, Arkansas. And there were other scandals that also they confiscated the material concerning. Although the coroner's report did not issue the type of death and the cause of death, when you put together all the information from the 16 CIA operatives that were there, it became clear as to what happened to him. Approximately 10 days earlier, Wiltshire had left his apartment with persons that were unknown to his fellow occupants in the building. He was taken to Vienna, Virginia, where he had been questioned at great length about his knowledge of very sensitive information, such as Waco. What happened to that group of individuals in Texas? He was served pizza and Pepsi, according to eyewitnesses. The latter, that was the Pepsi, was laced with DMSO, which was a substance that actually speeds the absorption process of poison into the body. Then there was curare, which is a poison that induces the relaxation of the muscles. And it was applied to the outside of his Pepsi glass, and it was absorbed through the skin and literally caused his death. He was then severely beaten so that it would simulate the appearance of a mugging in the local area. Then he was placed in the trunk of the automobile in a fetal position, and then he remained there for many days until rigor mortis set in. Then he was taken inside of his own apartment and placed on the toilet seat and left there. This incident actually is a reminder of the days when the Gestapo was actually coming in to power. This is the type of activity that took place before the Nazis came into full power in World War II. This tells us there is a new world order that's on the ascendancy when anyone that has documentations and files that can prove what is happening within this select group inside the government of the United States. This tells me there is coming a time when there's going to be tens of thousands of individuals who are literally going to be taken as they were in Russia in 1919, all the way through the 30s under the Stalin era, to concentration camps. Then in Nazi Germany, and they'll knock on the door in the middle of the night, and they'll take people away. Now what I'd like to do is turn to a very startling group of revelations regarding the top secret intelligence organizations on the very highest level of the government of the United States. The information that I'm going to bring to you today was given with the approval of the White House. Ex-CIA Director William Colby accumulated all of this information into a file to turn it over to the government. However, he made duplicate files and gave the information so that it would not be squashed at the White House. The entirety of all the information put together shows that the goal of the government of the United States, since it's turned to a far leftist type of government, is now to bring a totalitarian dictatorial control of America, and then after America is captured, the rest of the world. Mr. William Colby was an ex-director of the CIA. He revealed to a very close friend of his some of the things that were going on behind the scenes. In a very stunning expose, a man by the name of Gordon Novel, his very close friend, who he had worked with while Mr. Colby was in the CIA, he went on on a talk show called Freedom Forum and unloaded all of this information. This was on October 10th, 1996. Immediately afterward, he was arrested by his own government. He is currently in prison. He worked with CIA directors on several occasions, but he was never a part of the CIA himself. Mr. Gordon Novel, who revealed this information on the program Freedom Forum, knew Bill Colby from 1976 until he died on a very formal basis because they worked together very often. And Mr. Novel was one of those individuals that received the entire package of documents that Bill Colby was trying to get to the American people. He was actually trying to get it to the Senate and House subcommittees investigating Waco and other atrocities, but the government would not release the information. I'm going to be quoting from Mr. Novel. During and after the House hearings concerning Waco, we discussed what we perceived to be an extremely serious cover-up on the part of both the Republicans and the Democrats in terms of keeping out of evidence involving such things as deliberate murder. This is very interesting that he would choose such words. And before I'm through, you'll understand why those words were chosen carefully. After that, he agreed to covertly assist. This is Bill Colby, ex-director of the CIA. He agreed to assist in gathering all the information and the evidence that he had in his files on the case of Waco. He said, my initial involvement with Waco began 3 weeks before the initial raid on February 28, 1993. I was talking with a close friend of mine, a retired special agent in charge of the ATF in New Orleans. His son-in-law was going to be on the raid at Waco. He was to be in the second helicopter filming everything for the government. He was that ATF agent that literally was there when they took orders from the White House how to conduct the attack. This is very important because the evidence and the documents that our Senate and House will not reveal to the American people is that the White House personally sat down and ordered up the attack on Waco. This is our government, folks. Then he went on. Mr. Novel said, I have a security company called Force One. At that time, I had General Daniel O'Gray on my board of directors, who was then the former deputy director of the CIA, as well as the director of the Defense Intelligence Agency. I got in touch with him and asked him, Danny, what's going on? He said, I don't know. Whatever it is has been declared national security. Remember in 1947, the National Security Act was passed. This act was passed for one reason, so the government could put a lid on anything they did not want the American people to know. And so here, ordering up the destruction at Waco was declared national security. Nobody that was involved in it was to leak anything out under threat of going to prison. Then Mr. Novell said, I asked him, how can a raid on a church be national security? He said he didn't have an answer for that at that time, but later on, we did understand when all the information came to us. Then Mr. Novell tells how that he and another top negotiator by the name of Mike Hall offered to go to Waco, negotiate 3 days after the initial raid to bring the people out. Novell had had some success in the Middle East. Remember in Beirut, Lebanon in 1987, they had negotiations to bring out some of the people there. But the FBI director, Jamar, which many of us saw on national television while the Waco episode was going on, refused to let him go in to try to get the people out. You'll understand why as I continue. He said immediately after he was turned down on the possibility of going in and negotiating with the Branch Davidians, he said that he was in touch with some of the British intelligence people that he had worked with during his White House years under the Nixon administration. And he mentioned to them that he had detectives in Fort Worth, Texas, that had noticed that a British Special Air Services, now this is military, surveillance aircraft was at Waco with its forward-looking infrared cameras. Now, I'm going to stop there just for a moment. I looked up in the dictionary, in the unabridged dictionary, what posse comitatus is. There was a law passed in 1878 because of the Civil War that said no government can send military troops against civilians on American soil again. That law is in force in America. The Posse Comitatus Act says that the sheriff can call up every able-bodied person 15 years of old and being a male in good health in the county in which they reside to solve all problems. Not a federal agency from Washington, D.C., not even somebody from another county in the same state. So there are things happening in America today that are totally unconstitutional and against all the laws that made this nation great and guaranteed our freedoms. I'll continue now with Mr. Novell's conversation on the radio talk show. I asked of them what he thought was going on. So he asked these British intelligence agents that he had worked with before, what's going on? They said, we think, this is the Brits now, we think they're going to kill them all. I asked why they thought that. And the British agents said, because we're looking at some of the work product. Now, when they make an attack, that's called a product, some of their work product. And they looked at the building down there, and when the 2 vehicles pulled up in front of the Branch Davidians' place, they were cattle trucks with BATF agents hidden inside. David Koresh walked out the door, was going to greet them and welcome them to the property. They jumped out and started shooting with automatics, and he was wounded in several locations on his body and staggered back inside the building. 13 bullet holes from the outside in went through the door. And when the trial came up, they accidentally lost a door. I don't know how these things happen, but anything that incriminates illegal activity on the part of the government, they lose it. Well, if you're in control of the evidence, it's easy. You just burn it. But he said that the reason why was because at night, when the airplanes fly over, the pictures, pictures of the roof of the building look like a star field. He said, I don't understand. What are you talking about? He said the lights from inside the building are coming through the holes where the helicopter gunship shot up the roof. At the same time, when the cattle trucks, the BATF agents jumped out and started firing on the Branch Davidians. And this was a Vietnam tactic where they would shoot the upper floor and drive the inhabitants to the lower floor. So he said, the evidence is we fired on them first. So the British said they have to destroy the entire building and they have to kill everybody inside so that no one will be able to testify to the government's attack upon a church. He continued, we got in touch with the Brits when we found out that the plane was out there, and so we could see some of the work product. I had good connections over there. They usually told us that in their opinion, they were going to have to kill them because the building was the best evidence that they had machine gunned it with helicopters. Then notice the second thing that he found. The second discovery involves the fire. I had worked in a firefighting program in Kuwait after the Gulf War and had done a special high technology proposal for the Emir. That's the leader or the head of the Kuwait government. I use combat engineering vehicles, tanks, converted to engineering purposes. They had the tanks at Waco. And there was a lake right in front of the building about 75 yards away. There was a water pump inside of each tank, just like in a fire engine for putting out fires on the battlefield inside the tank, or for draining ditches so that the tank could get out of the ditch. They had all the fire equipment necessary to put out the fire at Waco. They could have simply hosed it down by using the tanks. They had tremendous firefighting capability in those tanks if they wanted to put out the fire. Remember that. If they wanted to put out the fire. Now the most important part that I'm coming to of this message today is the actual plan. The actual plan that the government of the United States called the operation at Waco. The D plan. But what, I'm continuing Mr. Novell's quote. But what they really wanted to do was burn down the building. We've subsequently seen the master plan for doing it. It's called the D plan. On July 1st, I had seen the D plan from a friend of William Colby's who knew that I was working with him, and they're going to turn over the entire plan to us. We were then going to release it to the Senate and House Judiciary Committees. From what I've seen, I personally think, now this is Mr. Novell repeating William Colby's personal evaluation of what's going on in the government of the United States. From what I've personally seen, I think that the next election, that was 1996, this interview was in December of 1995, he believed that the next election will be the last free election in the United States and maybe the world. That means Revelation 13 jumping off the pages of your Bible. Then Mr. Novell said Colby was of the opinion that these guys, and remember these are his words, were hell-bent on creating a condition that would erode all of our constitutional freedoms. Remember what was just said. Creation of conditions that would erode all of our constitutional freedoms. Notice what he said next. Mr. William Colby, and this is why he just happened to drown in a boating accident 2 weeks after he sent this file to Janet Reno. Ultimately, that will happen. This is the erosion of all of our constitutional freedoms. Sometimes in 1997 or 1998. What have we been saying in this ministry for a long time? What did we point out showing about gathering? The numbers 1996 in the Strong's Concordance of the Greek language. A coming together. And then 1997, a complete coming together. And then in 1998, the word in the Strong's Concordance meant running together. Why would you have to run? Could it be that possibly all of our constitutional rights will have been eroded by that period of time, and people from everywhere who's been hearing the message and have started living their lives right with God Almighty all of a sudden understood that they needed to go where God was calling for an ingathering of saints? We'll wait and see. This is their words, though, right from the ex-CIA director who had his hands on the files and knew what was happening in the United States of America. And he said that it would start happening sometime in 1997 or 1998. Then he went on to say a possible reason and how they would cause this erosion when they start using what we call the pocket nukes. A miniature Israeli-designed, briefcase-sized nuclear weapon that can actually be left sitting in an apartment building. A detonator goes off when the person's safely out of range, and it'll blow 20 square blocks to pieces. Then, who would get the blame? Muslims. They were the ones that were convicted of the New York building, weren't they? Who is it that says they're going to destroy the United States of America, that we're the great Satan? The Muslims. What about the movie True Lies? Who was it shown that had all these nuclear weapons and was going to use it against the United States, and how they had hijacked them and so on? It was the Muslims. He said, I've seen a series of tapes by Bill Colby that we've been trying to get the Congress to listen to, but they don't want to listen. I would almost say that the Republicans would rather lose the 1996 election than to expose the Colby tapes. Excuse me. And the evidence that we've dug up as a direct result of Bill Colby's investigation. Before he disappeared in a typical CIA accident, now this is Mr. Novell's words, which is common in Washington, D.C. To be exact, there's been at least 24 former CIA agents or active agents that's gone for a swim in the rivers and didn't come back. Probably had weights tied to their feet, but I wasn't there. But anyway, he went on to say, Bill Colby said on one of these tapes that Ruby Ridge, that was Idaho, was a deliberate operation using the BATF, that's the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, to start the assault on the right wing in America. What is the right wing? Opposite of the left wing. The right wing is supposed to be your constitutionalists, your conservatives, your Christians. The left wing are your communists. Who was it? Was it Mr. Derek Shearer, who was the roommate in England, Rhodes Scholar, roommate at Oxford University of present President Bill Clinton? They were both Rhodes Scholars, both communists, And he wrote a book in 1980 and said during the 1990s, someone would be elected as a far leftist. Well, what has always been the goal of the leftists? To destroy the right, so that all the conservatives, the Christians, would be destroyed and they could set up their world government under international communism. I'll continue his statement. They're using gun confiscation and assaults on religion as a preliminary setup for a global police state by the year 2000. Remember, I've brought and we've put in print and I've given in sermons on several occasions the communist rules for revolution. What was the very final rule? And this is the last step they'll take before overthrowing a country. Gun confiscation. Disarm the populace so there'll be no resistance when they march into the homes. I'll continue now Mr. Novell's statements. If they start detonating pocket nukes in 1997 or 1998 in places like Harlem, Soho district in London, these are the poor areas of the country, or there's a Soho district in Japan also, and other places around the world, it won't take long for the United Nations to declare martial law and suspend all liberties globally. I think that's very interesting. Now, notice what a gentleman who at one time, when Mr. Nixon resigned the presidency of the United States, he was the head of the State Department, and or Secretary of State, he gave a speech on May 21st, 1992 in Evian, France, before a group of conspirators. Remember the Webster's definition? Men who sit down and plot for their own purposes. Here's what he said. Henry Kissinger is his name, who was a double agent during World War II, and his double agent code name, his communist code name was Bohr. Here's what he said at that meeting, quote, "Today Americans would be enraged if United Nations troops entered Los Angeles to restore order. Tomorrow they'll be grateful. This is especially true if they were told there was an outside threat from beyond, whether real or promulgated." What is promulgated? It's a made-up lie. Whether it's real or not, we'll just tell them the problem. And since we control the media, we'll bombard them with a problem that threaten our very existence. It's then that all peoples of the world will plead with world leaders to deliver them from this evil. The one thing every man fears is the unknown. When presented with this scenario, individual rights will be willingly relinquished for the guarantee of their well-being granted to them by their government. End of quote. Henry Kissinger. And a Swiss delegate recorded that, and it was taken off there and then sent to various loyal groups to America in the United States. You know, this is very interesting to me because he says that Ruby Ridge was only the starting assault on the right wing. If that's the case, then is there now legislation that has been passed that literally has us set up for a complete takeover of all police departments in the United States of America so that they can put in their own police force? There was a radio interview. It was called Blueprint for Survival, December the 9th, 1996. An officer from the Los Angeles Police Department was interviewed. I'm going to quote part of that interview. His name was Officer George. He warned that recent legislation passed in the fall of 1996, we know it as the Anti-Terrorism Bill, required the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearm to remove all police officers and military personnel accused, not necessarily convicted, only accused of a misdemeanor, all their weapons would be confiscated. They would be replaced with police or military personnel, either from a foreign country or domestically trained for this purpose. And the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearm would be the one to choose who replaced those police officers. The only agencies in the United States that would be exempt from the new legislation was the FBI, the BATF, and the DEA. All others can be replaced with men which our government specifically trained to go into those positions. Here's what he said on that program. All that's necessary is for an accusation to be made of a misdemeanor, not necessarily being proven to be guilty. It could be that you spoke too loud, and therefore it was misconstrued to be threatening. That's all that would have to happen, and your guns would be taken. You'd be dismissed from the police force. You could speak too loudly to a spouse and be overheard. Or if your spouse reported you, all your guns would be taken, and then you would be replaced. You could speak harshly to a family member, or even an animal, according to Officer George. He said this was originally designed to remove weapons from all involved in domestic abuse. But now it is turned in to be exactly like Article 58 of the Soviet Union, where they've expanded it so that they could confiscate everything you have. Guns, gold coins, silver coins, food, anything that you have, they're confiscating it. And Officer George gave an example. He said a friend of a friend got himself in trouble by speaking too loud to his wife. She was so irate she reported him. As a direct result, the BATF came to his home, came into their home, confiscated everything he had. Everything. He was dismissed, and he's going to be replaced by individuals they choose. This is happening already, but you'll never see it on the nightly news that is controlled by the far leftists known as communists in America. You'll never see it. They'll only tell you that the far right, they are the enemies of America, those that want the Constitution to remain, those that want the Bill of Rights to remain so that we can be a truly free people and with the ability to worship our God. You see, this is what the beast system of Revelation 13 is all about, to destroy every right mankind may have. And it's happening before our very eyes, and yet the world sleeps on. Now I'll continue Mr. Novell and his discussion on shortwave radio. Mr. Bill Colby told Mr. Novell that Waco, from the very beginning to the end, was a diplomatic operation to send a signal to the Bosnian negotiators and to the generals that were represented at Geneva, Switzerland, that they had better negotiate a settlement or else what happened at Waco would also happen to them. Just wait till you find out the truth as to what happened to Waco. It'll make you mad. It'll make you want to stay up all night saying words that you know a Christian should never say. I'm quoting Mr. Novell again. If he, Bill Clinton, could mount an armored strike with tanks and helicopters on a little church on the prairie and wipe out 80 to 90 people, then the Bosnians got the message that Clinton was capable of doing anything. They timed it for April 19th in order to be able to time it for the opening of the Holocaust Museum in Europe. He said that Europeans think conspiratorially because of all the wars they've had on their continent throughout the centuries. So when they saw this happen on April 19th, and they saw the Branch Davidians' flag, the Star of David, flying over their building, they got the message. and the opening of the Holocaust Museum, the message was received loud and clear in Geneva, Switzerland. To be exact, the timing of Waco, and remember, he said that it was called up from the White House itself. They premeditatedly murdered those people for a reason, a political reason. He said that they definitely did this on April 19th because exactly 50 years before that was when the Nazi Germans stormed the ghettos in Warsaw, Poland, and burned it to the ground and started arresting the Jews and putting them in concentration camps. He said, this is Bill Colby, told Mr. Novell, Gordon Novell, that these generals and the negotiators in Geneva, Switzerland, were told off the record by the American negotiator that Clinton will not stop and not tolerate anything from them, and that he would send them a message that they had better cooperate with him. Then Mr. Novell went on and said there was a bomb that went off in the fire over the Branch Davidians complex at 12:20 p.m. It looked like a small nuclear bomb going off with its mushroom-shaped cloud. I have a picture, color picture of that, and it looks just like a nuclear bomb. There's no doubt. He said that this was a direct message for those negotiators in Bosnia that were at Geneva, Switzerland at that time. He said it was a part of their psyops, their psychological operations on the Bosnians to let them know that if they didn't cooperate, this is exactly what would happen to them in Bosnia. The United States would drop tactical nuclear weapons on them to stop their civil war. At the time that this bomb was detonated, there were 28 women and children huddled under the bomb where it blasted, where it went off. It literally obliterated, incinerated 5 of the children, according to Mr. Novell and William Colby, who had the photographs from the CIA, the FBI, and the BATF. Colby was able to get the interior photos of the church vault. That was the part down in the ground where the women and children were, where they stored all of their documents about their church. And that's where the women and children fled to, and they dropped the bomb right on it. He said, based upon all the rocks and the concrete and the ammunition that was there, that there was no other explanation other than a pocket-sized nuclear bomb was set off. And that all of this report was being compiled from CIA evidence, from FBI and so on, by former Attorney General Ramsey Clark and David Hardy. They were going to enter a lawsuit for the Branch Davidians, proving that the government set them up, intentionally wanted to kill them for political reasons. That has not happened yet. I wonder why. It seems that anybody that gets this information shows up in a grave somewhere or in prison. Mr. Colby furnished most of the evidence to Mr. Novell and his group that were going to present this. Mr. Novell says that he saw the letters personally, the correspondence from the State Department to the White House, from the White House to the Justice Department and Janet Reno, and from the Justice Department to the FBI and the Treasury Department, because the FBI and the Treasury, the BATF comes under the Treasury Department, and he said it was orders to destroy Waco. He said it was planned in advance, and orders were sent from the 4 different branches of government to call up this warfare. And it even said he saw specifically how they wanted it done. Our government that is now under leftists in America Now can we understand why they're building concentration camps? Now do we understand why at Fort Dix, New Jersey, they're now building a new prison facility on a military base? And the whole description of the prison facility is for civilians, not military. And they even put the job in Ohio on the Unemployment Bureau of Ohio so that you could go in and see it and apply for the job. It's no longer secret. The D plan called for total obliteration of the Branch Davidians by fire and gas. Mr. Novell said, and I'm quoting once again, the D plan to totally obliterate the building by fire and gassing had 90 times the amount of gas required to deter the individuals or incapacitate trained soldiers. 90 times more than necessary. He said in the last gassing, there was no CS mix. A chemical called methylene chloride or methylene chloride mixed with ethanol. That's why the autopsy showed they had ethanol inside of their system, which was lethal. Then he said, going back to the John F. Kennedy assassination years, he knew Mr. Ramsey Clark firsthand back in the 60s when he worked for President Johnson. He indicated, this is President Johnson, indicated to this Mr. Novell, Gordon Novell, that there was a black apparatus in operation within the government of the United States. And this had to do with private and secret intelligence operations. But it was not necessarily agents of our government, but they were working within the government. And it was covered up by high levels of government. And a person called in on that talk show and asked him, do you mean that these were squads of assassination? And Mr. Novell said yes. He also said, in effect, this black apparatus, as a group of people who believe in totalitarian methods of government, who are now within our government and have formed an association. Now, what is this association? Mr. Bill Colby told Mr. Novell exactly what it was. Before Colby's death, he indicated that they were currently calling themselves, that started in 1939 within the government, the Order of One. He said that this group is functioning within the FBI and other agencies of the government at very high levels to effect totalitarian changes within our government. And he said the purpose was in order to eliminate guns from the hands of the people. And, listen to this, to create and then destroy the militia. Now, what is a militia? The Constitution of the United States says that we have a right to have a militia, civilian militia, to make sure the government never goes into tyranny and to protect our freedoms. Our government knows that well. So they said they would have to create such conditions in America that they could erode all of our constitutional rights. One of the ways to do it was to make an attack upon a single family by the government. It doesn't matter if they had to settle in court for $3 million. It doesn't matter. Why? Because they just print it off and it's paper money and it means nothing. It's just national debt you and I will end up having to pay. So the government didn't pay it. We are the government. So they handed over $3 million to the Weaver, Mr. Weaver and his children. But after Waco, they said they knew there would be militia groups that would start rising as a direct result of the atrocity that took place. And the government would send in their own government provocateurs and infiltrate into these militia groups. they would provoke them into breaking the law. Then the law would come in and crush them and make the militia look like the bad people. The ones who are for the Constitution of the United States, for our freedom, who does not want to see international communism take us and put us in concentration camps. The whole media would turn the people's minds away from the true patriots and make the true patriot look like the enemy of the government. Haven't they done a wonderful job? You mention anything about somebody being a patriot, first thing that goes off in your mind, they're the bad guys. They're hauling all the guns around. They're going to blow up buildings. The media painted this for us. And the government in their D plan laid bare their whole program. They said also that if militia do not rise, the government would send their own agents to create militia units. Then when those patriots of America came out from under the cover, then they would come in and crush them. What's been happening all over America today? Have we seen infiltrators into the movement called militia? Yes, we have. How about the U.S. News and World Report, May 12th, 1997 edition, page 40, brand new. Here's what it says. The secret FBI militia alliance. Did they lay out the D plan in detail? Yes, they did. Did they figure out a way to suck out from under the covers and behind every bush the true patriots of America to destroy them? Yes, they did. They've got to confiscate their guns so that there will be nobody pointing a gun at them when they knock on your door between 2 and 5 a.m. to take you to the concentration camps. This is America. The whole scene is just like it was in Russia before the Bolshevik Revolution. It's just like it was in Nazi Germany before the Nazis started knocking on the doors. A caller called in and said, would this be with or without the knowledge and consent of the White House? Mr. Novell said, with their consent and full knowledge, because he had been in government positions before. He said the evidence they've accumulated is overwhelming in the federal record concerning Waco, that the FBI murdered those people, and he said, I'm choosing my words. They murdered them deliberately, intentionally, and with malice aforethought. Those were his words, because they had to create such a problem in America so they could begin to erode our personal freedoms. Mr. Colby said that Vince Foster had been sucked into the whole scheme, and he began to feel guilty about it. He said that Foster had realized that his activities had caused the deaths of those people in Waco. And he was afterwards told that it was to be a part of a national security operation, and that it was to convince the Bosnians to negotiate. You see, the Croats, the Muslims, and the Serbian generals were very barbaric, and they had already killed approximately 250,000 people in what they called their ethnic cleansing. They didn't think that Mr. Clinton could muster up enough support from the Congress of the United States for a military strike against them on their own soil. So according to Bill Colby, ex-CIA director, Mr. Bill Clinton was petrified that Bosnia would fracture the NATO alliance, and that if they began to fight there, then the Russians would supply the Serbians. Then the Germans and the Austrians would begin to supply the Croats. And the Arabs would begin to supply the Muslims. And all of them would be armed to the teeth. And it could cause World War III to break out. and it would actually escalate into another Afghanistan-type situation, and the United States didn't want to get involved in it. So they sent the negotiators to Geneva, Switzerland, and said, look, we will send you a signal. This is what will happen to you if you don't negotiate and stop the fighting. And that's why they detonated a pocket-sized nuke on Waco. It happened. They have the evidence. He went on to show that Vincent Foster's death was an assassination to shut him up because he had made some mistakes. He actually made threats to the administration that he would go public as to what happened in Waco as well as Watergate and Mena, Arkansas. And some of the discussions that he had, Mr. Foster, before his death was that he felt guilty for the deaths of the 25 children at Waco. So he was not happy about the circumstance. He was afraid that it would leak out. He would end up in prison. So all of a sudden, they had to stop him. They had to be very thorough in their cover-up of Waco, and he was the first in their thorough cleansing of those who might be able to betray them. You see, Mr. Colby got most of the data that I'm giving to you and that Mr. Novell gave out on radio interviews until they imprisoned him. From spies inside the Justice Department, inside the FBI, and inside this Order of One that was founded within the government in 1939. In December of 1995, Mr. Colby gave Mr. Novell and his group investigating Waco one of the first major parts of the evidence, the forward-looking infrared tape. Mr. Colby had it in his possession from that second helicopter that went over Waco, taping everything. It actually showed the FBI machine gunning the women and the children that were trying to get out of the fire once it was started. They were trying to get out of the vault in the rear of the building. And that film, video tape, actually showed our government, FBI agents, shooting them and at them. The Congress will not even look at the video. It also shows the FBI setting the fire in the cafeteria area in the rear of the gymnasium. And that's where we saw the fire first start. They use what they call flight rights, according to Bill Colby, which was pyrotechnic CS shells. They fired them into the building. It saturated the building. And then all of a sudden, when the fire was set, it would just go from particle to particle. Then when they dropped the mini-sized nuke on the vault, and all of a sudden the mushroom cloud, the building just blew to pieces with fire. It just went through the building in a matter of seconds for anybody that was watching on national television, which I happen to be. Then Mr. Novell went on with more of Colby's explanation as to what happened and what was in his files. There were about 76 undeniable bursts of machine gun fire. This is from the FBI that was on the videotape taken from that second helicopter. And they're on the government tape that was introduced into the record. But the government, the Senate and House, won't watch the tape. He said it takes special technology that someone in the technical services would be able to prove that there were gun firing. And it showed, when it was amplified, yes, it actually showed the flashes, it showed the machine guns, and it showed the people who were holding them, and they had silencers on their machine guns. Now, you tell me if somebody comes in firing a gun with a silencer already attached to it, if that was not premeditated. I can remember when there was a group of men, when there was a Revolutionary War in Texas, they held up at a little place called the Alamo. And the slogan from that day forward was, "Remember the Alamo." Somebody ought to come up with a slogan, "Remember Waco." Because this is what our government did to us. And I don't want anybody to get any wrong idea. The United States Constitution is the greatest piece of paper ever been assembled to govern people. If we were under the Constitution of the United States like it always was in the past, then this would still be a great country if God's blessing was upon it. But we are no longer under the Constitution. All you have to do is go into one of the courts in this land and you'll find out you're going into the courts to fight them with a Constitution, but they have a different set of laws. And your Constitution doesn't hold water in their courts. So something happened back there. So the government is now making dramatic strides because the year 2000 is coming. This video film showed the FBI setting the fires, machine gunning the women and the children as they were trying to get out of the church vault. They were blown up 20 minutes later with the mini nuke, according to Bill Colby. This is not the kind of evidence that you can refute because it was right there on the video. Bill Colby had it. He was the ex-director of the CIA. Mr. Novell said they've even taken this video to PhDs. They've taken them to technical experts for the Army's night vision laboratories in Aberdeen so that they could test the tapes to make sure they were authentic. And there was no doubt in any one of those persons' minds that tested the tape, they were originals. They were first line tapings. Then he went on to say, yes, there was no doubt the machine gun firing came from the guys hiding behind the tanks and in sniper positions around the building. He also stated there's a 5.5-minute segment from the tape that is now turned up missing from 10:47 to 11:02 a.m. that day when they attacked and burned down the building. He said that I saw the tape in New Orleans on December 22nd, 1995, before that segment got erased. Colby didn't want it released, but he had to, and that's when they erased it. He said, if I give you that means the tape, you'll know who is getting all this information. In other words, they will know that it's Bill Colby giving them the information. If he turned that tape over to Mr. Novell and his group, so he wouldn't give them the tape. He had to turn it over to the government. The government erased it. He said, we saw them using blinding lasers, firing them at the Branch Davidians who were coming out of the building when the fire started in the rear of the building. He said, literally, the Branch Davidians that made it out of the building were blinded. Then the tanks came up, drove them back into the building, and they just pushed them with the blade that was attached to the front of the tanks. And all that was on the missing 5 minutes, and he saw it. No wonder the government has him sitting in prison. He knows too much. Then the question was asked by the talk show host, Don Wiedemann. He said, was the government actually using laser weaponry against the Branch Davidians who were trying to escape? And Novell said, yes. They were firing what is called IR blinding lasers made by McDonnell Douglas and Allied Signal Corporations. These are high-tech, super secret weapons that were being tested on the Davidians to blind them as they exited the building. And he said, I mean permanently blind them. Even if they had remained alive and somehow got out of the building, they would have been permanently blind and never saw the light of day again. He said they were sitting ducks. They didn't have a chance. You see the streaks of light coming from the Sierra 2 super nest at the building, as it was called, on site. This is where the FBI snipers were. He said, I saw this, but now it's been erased from the tape. He went on to say, and this is going to get a little interesting as I begin to come to a close here. He said, let me tell you what we found over at StarTech Gas Supply Company in Waco. You see, the government said that it was a propane gas tank that blew up and caused the big fire and the big ball of fire at the top of the building. He said StarTech got the big 250-gallon propane container that the government swore up and down blew up and made that fireball. It's sitting over there, unharmed. It was empty and had not been filled. So there goes the government's saying that it was a propane gas that blew up that caused that fireball. He went on to say the government arson investigator Paul Gray swore before the Congress that the propane gas container was blown up. We have the original. It was an absolutely empty container. Then he went on and revealed a most startling thing. The University of Maryland was paid $250,000 by the Justice Department to write a report that attributed the explosion directly over the church vault as being the result of 100 gallons of propane. The only propane container there was an empty one. They not only lied in their Justice Department report, but they lied before the Congress, and Congress is covering it up. Then this is where it's going to get even more interesting, because you see, Mr. Colby was alive when he revealed all this information and turned his file over to Mr. Novell and others so that there would be multiple people who had this file of this evidence. He said the Oklahoma City bombing is along the same line, a political move. At the time of the April 19th, 1995 blast, he said, I was introducing Mr. Clark, that's the former Attorney General, to about 200 newsmen at the actual site of Mount Carmel in Waco. Colby told me that the FBI anticipated the Waco aftermath would cause militias to form, and that the Oklahoma City bombing had been planned to remove the April 19th massacre from the media consciousness. That way they wouldn't show Waco anymore. They would only show Oklahoma City. And that would take all the heat off the federal government being involved in Waco and their atrocity. And this was before it happened, that this was revealed, that it was planned in advance. That's why John Doe 2, 3, and 4 that was actually seen with the Ryder truck, and possibly John Doe number 5 has never been found. But every one of us that saw the news media within 45 minutes after the explosion know they were looking for more than one individual, all the way up into Missouri. We know it. They even had drawings of them and placed them right in magazines that came out on the news media. And all of a sudden, when the federal guys got there, they stopped that. There was only one person. Now we have a national day of mourning for a federal building that was blown up. He said that that blowing up of that building would send a final message to Bosnia. And that was the purpose for it. While beginning at the same time, so one purpose was send the message to Bosnia, first Waco, 2 years later, then the federal building, while at the same time beginning an attack on the militias and enacting new counterterrorism laws in order to take away our freedoms. I ask one question. Has it worked? Have they passed counterterrorism laws saying that the President of the United States can choose an individual that he considers to be a terrorist? And that person can be picked up, all because one man. And if you declare martial law and suspend the outward appearance of the Constitution, there is nothing to stop him from declaring anyone who is a constitutionalist, patriot, or preaching God's word and exposing the truth from being taken and called a terrorist. He said it would be the beginning of the attack on the militias and enacting new counterterrorism laws in order to take away our freedom. He said, although the terrorism is actually being created by our own government. Now, these are people who have been working in Washington, D.C. for at least 40 years. The ex-CIA director. These are the ones that have had the files. They had access. They should know. And you know what else is so interesting? Bill Colby, who was the director of the CIA, said that Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols thought they were actually joining an elite military counterterrorism unit. And that they were told not to ask any questions. Don't ask why, just do what you're told. Now that explains a lot of things. Why somebody would so casually go up and just park a vehicle, get out and walk away as if he wasn't doing anything. Maybe he didn't even know what was going to happen. Maybe he was just told to go buy this fertilizer and put it in a truck and then take it and park it there and then drive away. Maybe he knew nothing. Maybe that's why he can't defend himself. And the 70 witnesses who said they saw John Doe 2, 3, and 4, and possibly number 5, and even described them, have never been called to testify in the court of law. Because if the American people found out that this was a part of the plan, and that it was a deliberate part of the government of the United States to start destroying the militia and to create terrorism in America so they could pass these anti-terrorism laws, there would be revolution overnight. Bill Clinton would not be president very long if the people understood what was really taking place in America right now. But they don't. They never will. It's like there's a blinder pulled down over the eyes of the people, and they just can't comprehend and see what is happening. But he said that those individuals would be simply scapegoats. He said, why would an individual who just blew up 168 people drive down the highway without a license plate, knowing you're going to be pulled over more than likely? And then he said, this is Bill Colby. And he said, then you're stopped by a lone policeman, and here you've got a 9mm Glock on your side. You could have pulled it out and blown him away. Yet you willfully go along with him and let him arrest you. If you'd just killed 168 people and knew you were going to die for it, wouldn't you try to get away? This man didn't even know he'd done those things. He just did what he was told and went his merry way. Then Bill Colby said, if you want to get real technical, you find the people that funded the money for the blowing up of the World Trade Center, you'll find the same money supply that blew up the Murrah Federal Building. He said, I even knew as the ex-CIA director, while I was a director, that there was going to be an airplane blown up. But I didn't know where, and I didn't know which one. But I knew it was going to be blown up. Didn't we see at least 2 after that? The Value Jet down in Florida and TWA Flight 800, where eyewitnesses said they saw a missile go into it, and yet the government just pushes and poo-poos that off. Oh, yes. Mr. Novel, repeating Mr. Colby, said They're turning the FBI into a world KGB. Colby said that the American people have not been told that at that time, head of the FBI, Mr. Free, had opened up 250 offices around the world, and they were going to be the policemen in the New World Order. You see, it's all beginning to come together now. How they're doing it step by step. That's why Mr. Colby was assassinated, and Mr. Novell is in prison to silence him so this message cannot get out. The truth to the American people. They were to make war on the right wing. The following is an open letter that I wrote to every single congressman, senator, and House of Representative member in Texas, and every representative and senator from Texas in Washington, D.C. Dear Congressman, is communism dead? Certain people in our government and the news media tell us that the Cold War is over. Not one missile is pointed toward United States soil anymore. Can this be true? President Bill Clinton denies that Chinese missiles are pointed at us and tells us we are safe. And now, I'll quote Bill Clinton, because we didn't give up our leadership, because we are in a situation where we're destroying nuclear missiles more rapidly. Yes, we are out there by Amarillo, but Russia is building them. And you know what happened in the newspaper, in the Dallas Morning News? May 10th, 1997, Boris Yeltsin has now reversed Gorbachev's policy and said, we will have a first nuclear strike against America. We won't wait. If we're struck, we'll strike them back. We will have the first strike. What does that mean? Ezekiel 38:39 is jumping off the newspapers in Dallas, Texas. They're preparing because the United States is militarily defunct. I'll continue. Mr. Clinton's statement. And for the first time since the dawn of the nuclear age, there is not one single solitary nuclear missile pointed at an American child tonight. Not one. Not a single one. End of quote. That was President Clinton at a Jefferson-Jackson dinner in Des Moines, Iowa, October 20th, 1995. I saw it on C-SPAN. How can President Clinton be correct in the light of every communist pronouncement? This is my letter to those senators and representatives. Notice the words of V.I. Lenin, first dictator of a system that has murdered hundreds of millions of people in every nation they conquer. And America is on their list. Quote, as long as capitalism and socialism remain, we cannot live in peace. In the end, one or the other will triumph. A funeral requiem will be sung either over the Soviet Republic or over world capitalism. End of quote. That was V.I. Lenin. But notice also from the blueprint where where communism gets its strength. It's called The Art of War by Sun Tzu, a Chinese. Quote, all warfare is based upon deception. When capable, in other words, you have a mighty military apparatus, pretend incapacity, pretend weakness. When active, when you're actively building, pretend inactivity. Oh no, we're not building any new equipment. When near, appear to be far off. When far off, appear to be near. Offer the enemy a bait to lure him. How about a peace treaty? Destroy all your nuclear weapons. Destroy your radar units. Destroy your battleships. Destroy your B-52s, long-range bombers. But they keep building. feign or pretend disorder. What have they done in the Russian world? They said all the satellite countries are now free. Russia says we're in disorder. We're falling apart. Notice what he says. Pretend disorder and strike him. What are they doing? What have they been doing since 1985 when Gorbachev introduced it? They're pretending disorder in the whole communist world, in Europe. And then here's Yeltsin that turns around May 10th, 1997, reverses Gorbachev and says, we will make the first strike. Pretend one thing and do the opposite. You're going to get your nuclear helmets ready? It won't be long. Bible prophecy is coming to a fruition. Once again, in The Art of War, he says, when he concentrates, prepare against him. When he is strong, avoid him. That's the way the communists have always done. Pretend inferiority and encourage his arrogance. Keep him under strain and wear him down. What have the communists done for the last 70 to 80 years? Revolutionary war all over the world, and here we're running around trying to put out the fires. He said, wear him down. When he is united, divide him. What did they do? They had Ruby Ridge. Divide the country. The patriots against the government. What did they do in Waco? Divide the country. The militia against the government. Now what did they do in the Murrah Federal Building? They're now going to bring the country together. But it's going to be against all those they consider enemies of the state. Do we understand now how persecution is going to come upon the church? Because we believe there is a God in heaven. Communism doesn't. It's the opiate of the people. They've got to destroy it. So who do they destroy first? The right wing. He said attacked where he is unprepared. So we have totally dismantled all of our military practically to where we're down to 1/3 capacity of 5 years ago. And now, according to the newspapers, May 9th, 1997, they're going to make deep cuts further into the military. How do you make deep cuts into zero? I'll continue my letter. To capture a nation through infiltration or without fighting has always been the dream of communism socialism. Quote, the American people will never knowingly adopt socialism, but under the name of liberalism, they will adopt every fragment of the socialist program until America will one day be a socialist nation, not knowing how it happened. End of quote. That was Norman Thomas, 6 times candidate of the President of the United States on the Socialist Party ticket. Nikita Khrushchev came to the United States in 1959. 3 months before he came here, I will quote his very words. We can't expect the American people to jump from capitalism to communism, but we can assist their elected leaders in giving them small doses of socialism until they awaken one day to find they have communism. End of quote. Wonder why governments got their hand in everything? Federal, federal, federal. You never hear about state. It's always federal because the concentration and the centralization of power in Washington, D.C. is what they've wanted. They've always wanted it. Ex-KGB officer Anatoly Golitsyn, here's what he wrote in his 1984 book called New Lies for Old Lies. That the communists would introduce false liberalization in Eastern Europe and probably in the Soviet Union. Then he wrote another book in 1995 called The Perestroika Deception, in which the communist world would appear to be falling apart for the express purpose of disarming the United States, its last enemy. Thus merge Russian communism and the West based upon their terms. Then the final paragraph to these congressmen. If the merger does not succeed, the communist backup plan, quote, war to the hilt between communism and capitalism is inevitable. Today, that was the 1930s when they planned this, we're not strong enough to attack. Our time will come in 30 to 40 years. To win, we need the element of surprise. The Western world will have to be put to sleep. So we shall begin launching the most spectacular peace movement on record. Yes, the Berlin Wall removed. Pretense that the satellite states surrounding Russia are now free. There shall be electrifying overtures, unheard of concessions. The capitalist countries, stupid and decadent, will rejoice to cooperate to their own destruction. They will leap at another chance to be friends. As soon as their guard is down, we will smash them with a clenched fist. End of quote. Dmitry Manilovsky, who was the professor at the Lenin School of Political Warfare in Moscow. My final statement in this letter, will you please call for a joint session of the Texas legislature to discuss a plan in case these statements become reality within the next few years. This is putting a thought into their mind because you see in Revelation chapter 13, verse 7, it says very clearly that this government, this end-time government is going to rise. And it says that this government was given unto him, and it was given unto him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. And power was given him over all kindreds, tongues, and nations. So this government is coming. I've been laying out how it's being achieved now for many, many years. Right now, they're in their final stages to shut down anyone that would disagree with the government of the United States. Turn to Psalms 91 in my closing scripture. Psalms 91. You and I, hopefully, are a part of the very elect that God has selected to be a part of an end-time remnant of people who will dare to obey him, to be faithful to him, and to yield our lives to him. If we will do that, and that is if, I believe this scripture is for us. He that dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, he is my refuge and my fortress, my God, in him will I trust. Surely he shall deliver you from the snare of the fowler and from the noisome pestilence. He shall cover you with his feathers, and under his wings shall you trust. His truth shall be your shield and buckler. You shall not be afraid for the terror by night, nor for the arrow that flies by day. No, when they come knocking on the doors at night, we don't have to be afraid. If we're on God's side, God will be on our side. There is going to be few in number that are going to be wrapped up, as it were, in secret, according to Ezekiel chapter 5, verse 1 to 4. They're going to be kept away from these things. Revelation 3:10 says so. And then Revelation 12 to 17 shows there is going to be some that are going to be counted worthy to escape all these things. And this is what this chapter is talking about for those few. Verse 6, nor for the pestilence that walks in darkness, nor for the destruction that wastes at noonday. Yes, there is coming destruction in this land and upon the whole world. 1,000 shall fall at your side, and 10,000 at your right hand, but it shall not come nigh you. That is, if we have the spiritual garments on, and if we don't doubt our God. Only with your eyes shall you behold and see the reward of the wicked. How much more wicked can you get than bring up a D plan to which Ruby Ridge would be attacked, Waco, and people would be premeditatedly murdered for political reasons, and then blow up a federal building and say that it was somebody else to blame the militia? How much more evil can you get? God says He's going to reward these wicked people. You and I should never be a part of that. Because you have made the Lord, which is my refuge, even the Most High, your habitation. There shall no evil befall you, neither shall any plague come nigh to you, your dwelling. For He shall give His angels charge over you to keep you in all your ways, lest they shall bear you up in their hands, lest you dash your foot against a stone. You can read the rest on your own. But brethren, I believe with all of my heart that we're going to be seeing now an acceleration of the destruction of our freedoms in this country. And you and I must put Psalms 91 into our life. And we must put the covenant of God Almighty first above everything else. We can't be selective in our Christianity anymore. Select what part we want and throw the rest away. We have to put it first, as if nothing else in this world counted. That's called repentance. Because we're about to see everything we've ever discussed about the book of Revelation, about all the prophecies all coming together at one time at the very end of the age. You and I are going to see it.